Welcome to class number 14. This is the final class in the philosophy course, and it discusses the afterlife. As we say, the question is not, is there life after death, but rather, is there death after life? If something is truly alive, does it die? If something died, can it be alive? So this class is going to explore the Jewish view on what it means when someone passes away, what happens to the body, what happens to the soul. Do we continue to exist in some way after someone passes on? It begins in the student book on page 306, and we'll start with reading the overview. Let's share over here. And Stern, if you'd like to start reading class 14.
The afterlife. Oblivion, the end of all consciousness, can be scary to contemplate. We all want to know whether the memories, thoughts, and feelings that are so important to our identity will be able to live on once our physicality passes away. Torah explains that death, as we know it, is merely an end of our body. However, there is another amorphous part of ourselves that can and will never die. The second part is our deepest, highest, and most essential self.
Very good. So that's what we're going to be discussing today in depth, this idea. And just to clarify on the onset, the term Olam Haba, which literally translates as the next world, the coming world, there is dispute exactly if that phrase refers to the life of the soul after it departs the body, before the resurrection of the dead, or if it refers to the time when the dead will be resurrected. So everybody agrees that there is a concept of a place for the soul after it passes away. And everybody agrees that when the Mashiach comes, there will be a resurrection of the dead, Tchiyat HaMesim, the term in Hebrew, when the dead will become back alive. The only dispute is if the term Olam Haba, does it refer to the next world, or does it refer to after the coming of Mashiach and the dead are resurrected? Does that mean Olam Haba? So that's just to clarify, there is disputes amongst, so sometimes the phrase is used in both cases. But overall, we're just going to discuss the general ideas here. Another aspect to point out is, when we say the next world, the coming world, Olam Haba, it doesn't mean that that world does not exist yet and it's only going to come into the future. It means the world is existing now, but we don't experience it firsthand. We experience it not as number one, but we experience it as the second course. So for us, on our perception, it's a second world, it's a coming world, but in God's eyes, the world, both of them exist simultaneously. This world and the world of the souls are constantly in existence. Okay, so let's move on. We'll get to the key points at the end. Let's read just the introduction. Elia, if you'd like to read here the 2 lines in bold by the introduction.
Alive today, dead tomorrow. When we die, are we gone forever? Do we cease to exist? Is there an afterlife?
Mm-hmm. So what's your take on this matter? If you could just give us a 10-second thing, what do you think about it?
I think that I don't think we're gone forever. I think our souls might still exist. And this is something I'm really confused about because everybody always has a different opinion about it. And like the Christian view is like so engraved in our society of like heaven and like hell, and if you're a bad person and whatever. And so that's what like I feel like everybody, no matter what your religion, like, oh, sorry, my brother's screaming in the back, but yeah, that's something that I'm really confused about actually.
Okay, so I guess it's good that you're at this class. Hopefully we'll be able to clarify some ideas, which surprisingly, many of Christian ideas are actually Jewish, which they adopted. Not everything that's Christian is Jewish, of course. There are difference of opinions, which if someone is interested, there is actually, just as a side note I'll put in, there's a rabbi, his name is Tovia Singer. He has a website. It's called jewishoutreach.org. He wrote a book. It's called Bible Uncensored or Discovered, where he basically discusses Judaism and Christianity, where they disagree. And he's very good at quoting all the sources. And he has a lot of videos online where he debates or discusses those ideas, disproving a lot of the Jews for J or Messianic Christians, those ideas. But getting back to our point here, some of these ideas are definitely Jewish in origin. And this video, I'll show you now over here a clip. I think it's a really intelligent video, the way they put it. I don't know who came up exactly with the idea, but I think it really explains a lot as how we view things and the proper approach that we should have for ideas that we don't experience firsthand.
Birth and death are as contradictory as night and light, but they are strangely associated with an identical Hebrew word, kever. Kever means a tomb where a body is buried. But kever also means a womb where life is formed. A womb is a gateway to life, while a tomb is a gateway to afterlife. But is there an afterlife? Or does laying a body to rest in a grave mark the absolute end? If it were within our power to interview a soul, we would undoubtedly glean insight into afterlife. Instead, we have chosen to eavesdrop on a set of twins in their mother's womb to shed some light on the before life.
Hey, twin, I'm scared of birth. Why? It's the end of existence. We get ejected. We're finished. I'm also anxious, twin, but I'm not scared. Birth is supposed to be a transition to the real life. Huh. Don't give me the hiccups with your after-birth real-life fantasies. How can life be supported without an umbilical cord and amniotic fluid? Well, maybe it's a radically different form of life. Maybe we won't need the cord. I wish you were right. I keep kicking that thing away from my neck. Stop spinning for a minute and imagine, twin. After birth, we will enter a ginormous universe filled with light and with air that we will breathe through our mouths. Come on, grow some brain cells, will you? Mouths are not for breathing. Besides, if your postnatal paradise existed, why has no one ever returned from that realm? Forget it. Once we leave here, we collapse into cold, dry nothingness and wither into eternal gloom. I don't think Mother would allow that to happen. She nurtures us in this cozy womb. She sends us nutrients for months on end. For what purpose? Just to end it all with birth? No. Mother has greater plans for us than that.
Now you're beginning to sound infantile. Do you see a mother lurking in some corner of the womb? Not a trace. Show me a mother. And as for your nutrients, can't you feel that annoying cord? Don't exchange empirical for fantastical.
Thankfully, these two delightful infants made it safely to the other side. They grew up in the universe that one had described and the other had denied. And until today, they continue their clamorous debate. It is only that the topic of contention has slightly shifted from, is there life after the womb, to, is there life after the tomb?
So I think it's a really powerful video because it's giving us the idea that the discussions we have today could have been literally the same discussions that these children have. And someone will say, well, we never experienced it. There's no scientific proof in the womb that there exists a world out there. And you don't see the mother, and you don't see your source of life. You don't see anything other than your very minimal experience. And yet it would be foolish for them to believe that that's it. So let's move on to, we'll tackle this point by point. We'll start with number one is, who are you? Before we find out if you stay alive, we have to first define, who are you really? What is the person? How would you define scientifically or according to the Torah a human being? So Sheila, if you'd like to read A, I don't know if you can see it on your screen. Let's see if you can unmute. Oh, there you go.
Is this better?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Oh, okay, sorry. Who are you? The Torah has radically different views than science. In the Torah's opinion, a person is comprised of three distinct parts of the body: the life, soul, and the higher spiritual soul. The first two also exist in animals and plants. However, humans have a higher conscientiousness of a soul, which is intimately connected to God.
Yeah, so in addition to the body, which of course there's a physical body, there's a soul that gives it life, which that soul clearly departs when someone passes away. Because if you were to see a live person and a dead person side by side, there is no difference in their body as to why this person is alive and this person's dead. They both have fully parts, all the parts of their body are fully there, and yet this person is alive and this is not. So the difference is that their soul that gives life to their body, did it leave and stop functioning, stop making the body have its life? And in addition, there's the spiritual soul. The third aspect is not the soul that his job is to pump everything and get everything working properly, but the soul that is to bring a godly consciousness into our existence. So let's read over here. And Layla, if you'd like to read in order.
In order to answer the question of do we really die, we first need to answer who we are. Who
Okay.
are you?
What would you say? Who are you? How would you define yourself?
I am Layla. There's
No,
so many things I can define myself as.
Not as your personality or things that happen to you, but rather as a human being, regardless of who you are. If you were Layla, or if you were Shtarni or Elia or Sheila, the concept of a human that you have a common denominator with everyone, how would you define that?
I am a person. I don't really know what.
Right. Meaning my question would be, what defines a person? So let's see, I guess maybe this will help you. Let's read some of the additional sources here. So the body is, how about you read this? The body is complicated.
The body is complicated, composed of many intricate physical, emotional, and mental capacities, and guiding all of these functions is our nervous system. Is there more to our makeup other than a sophisticated functioning mechanism?
So we could say that our body is just a very sophisticated mechanism. We're a sophisticated machine, and therefore we have certain aspects that we can do. Therefore, some scientists will say that we're nothing more than a sophisticated mechanism. And here he gives you some quotes from, first one is, life is just a function of the body, that people are no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. Or others will say, in my worldview, consciousness is caused by brain processes, meaning there's nothing really outside of our physical existence, and the idea of a consciousness is just something from our brain as well. Or just as kidneys can produce urine, the brain produces consciousness. So these are theories that scientists will say. If you want to sum up, what are they trying to say in essence, is that essentially we're nothing more than a functioning machine, and therefore we might be very sophisticated of a version of Alexa, Siri, or a computer. We're just a little bit more sophisticated than them, but just as a computer or a smartphone, it has its great functions that it can do. But every mechanism, every machine has a period when it doesn't work anymore. There was a guy that had a store in our neighborhood, and when people would come in and say, what's the warranty on this product? Does it have a lifetime warranty? He says, one thing I can give you a guarantee is that it's going to break. It's going to break at some point or another. Nothing's going to last you forever. Don't think you're buying anything that will last you forever. So if our bodies are the same, like any machine that we buy, any appliance or any item, then we really do die, meaning there is a time when we just don't exist anymore. Like a machine, when there's a major irreparable malfunction, longer, it's not worth anything. We can move on. These machines that are not functioning will also disintegrate. They'll also turn into nothing, meaning eventually it could take hundreds of years, but eventually things go back to their natural source where they came from. But let's use a hypothetical for a moment. Imagine someone lost a loved one. And I were to tell you, I cannot bring back your loved one, of course. However, I can make a clone to your loved one. I can create something that will have not just think the same as your loved one, act the same, they'll even have the same voice, and scientists will somehow put a chip in their mind where the memories are all brought back. So you don't have your loved one anymore, but you have someone that can speak, act, remember exactly everything that your loved one knew. Would someone that feels the loss of a loved one be happy with an exact copy of their loved one? Everything that their loved one did, they can do exactly the same. I would love to hear some answers from you guys. If someone was offered that, do you think logically people would say, if that's the case, that I could have back my spouse or my father, my mother, and they know exactly whatever my parents knew, even though it's someone else, that's fine with me, as long as they give me whatever my father gave me or my grandfather gave me. Any thoughts? Yeah, sure. Please, Layla.
I don't think people would be like so thrilled about that. There just seems something kind of fake about it, and something like a soul or some kind of essence that wouldn't be the same.
Very good. Which you already started answering my question. The question would be, why not? If it's really just about having that person that knows how to laugh about the same memories and can talk about the same discussions that we have and give me the same type of enjoyment that I used to have, this clone can do exactly the same. Why would you say that people, which I agree, most people would not be happy with a clone, why would they not be happy? What's missing? How would you define that this is just not your loved one? This is just someone else. You may have your loved one's voice and your loved one's mind and expressions and manner and memory, but it's just not them. How would you define it? So the Torah gives us terminology of how we could define this. So let's read just here the slide with this question that we just asked. Besides for who are you, we said, would the clone be different? Why would it be different? In what way would the clone be different? And the answer is yes, 100% it would be different. And let's see how the Torah defines the difference between a human being and everything else that exists. So this is a quote from the book of Genesis. And Eliyahu, if you'd like to read source number 4.
God's breath creates life. And the Lord God formed Adam of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And Adam became a living soul.
Very good. So number one, it's not just that we're another machine, but rather there's a godly aspect to us. God breathed life into us. So our soul is not just something that functions, and then when it doesn't function, it's gone, but there's a godly aspect to it. That's really important to remember. And I didn't read these 2 lines above, but based on what we read, the scientists say, from what we read earlier, that it's just a brain or it's just molecules getting together, then a clone should fit the description. A clone should work. But because there's more to it, there's a godly aspect to it. We believe there's a soul. We say they're just not the same soul as my spouse, even if the bodily functions can be all the same. And we have here another quote. Sharon, if you'd like to read, this is from the Talmud, which it was incorporated into the daily prayer. It's actually on the first page of the standard prayer book that's said every morning. This was what the Talmud said should be recited when one wakes up in the morning, describing the soul. Now, note, The Hebrew has more than the English here, but the English is just bringing out the 2 lines that we're trying to focus on from this prayer. So Stein, if you'd like to read it in English.
My God, the soul that you have placed within me is pure. You created it, you formed it, and you blew it into me. Blessed are you, Hashem, who returns souls to dead bodies.
So we define ourselves, our life, as a godly aspect. God put something into us. He created a pure soul that was a part of him and put it into our bodies to function properly. And we bless God for returning souls to dead bodies, which has a double meaning. Dead bodies as in the time of the resurrection of the dead after the Messiah comes, after Mashiach comes, but also on a daily basis. When we wake up in the morning, to some degree, the Talmud compares it to 1/60th of death. And when we get back our soul, we're again re-alive. God put a soul back into us. So clearly, there is more to us than just a body. And let's see another quote from the Talmud regarding King David. Sheila, if you'd like to read, corresponding.
Corresponding to whom did David say these 5 instances of bless the Lord, O my soul? He said them about none other than the Holy One. Blessed be he, and corresponding to the soul, just as the Holy One, blessed be he, fills the entire world, so too the soul fills the entire body. Just the Holy One, blessed be he, sees but is not seen, so too does the soul see but is not seen. As the Holy One, blessed be he, sustains the entire world, so too the soul sustains the entire body. Just as the Holy One, blessed be he, is pure, so too is the pure soul pure. Just as the Holy One, blessed be he, resides in the chamber within a chamber. In his inner sanctum, as to the soul resides in the chamber within a chamber in the innermost recesses of the body. Therefore, that which has these 5 characteristics, the soul should come and praise he who has these 5 characteristics. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so the Talmud is describing here chapter 104 of Psalms, where David says 5 times, let my soul bless the Lord. And the Talmud says, why is he mentioning it 5 times? And he says, because David was so impressed how God gave us a godly soul, a soul that's so connected with God and has a lot of the characteristics just as God has. And therefore he feels that we owe it to God to give him that praise. So again, the Talmud over here brings out what we're trying to take out from this quote is the fact that our soul is not just a random force of life, like a battery in an iPhone. Battery in an iPhone is meaningless. I could switch it out any day and put in a new battery. It's just what I need from it. But rather, our soul is so much more than that. It's a part of God that is in our bodies. And here we have our last quote for this section. And Layla, if you'd like to read it.
Different souls. We are not referring to the soul found in all living flesh, which allows it to eat, drink, reproduce, feel, and think. Rather, the higher consciousness, which is the soul. It is concerning this soul that the verse states, in our image and in our likeness.
Very good. So when we say God created us in his image, meaning when he asked the angels, let us create man in our image, he didn't mean that God eats and drinks and sleeps in a house and he says, let's make a man that also has those needs. He said, let us give a soul, a godly soul to man. So we mentioned before there were 3 parts. There's the physical body, which of course gets buried. There's the soul that gives life to the body, which is connected to the body. And then there's the soul, which is greater than the body. It's in the body in the sense of while the body is alive, it's connected with what the body does. But when the body departs, it has its own function. That aspect is connected with God. So in essence, we could divide it into 2 general categories. One is the body, including the life that the body has in order for it to survive. And then you have the soul, which when we say a higher consciousness, it would be the aspect that can capture spirituality, the aspect in our life that brings meaning and divine purpose. That would be the definition of the soul that we're discussing. And here, I'll pull up a video that can explain this in another way. It's an interesting video too. just giving us a example that we can relate to.
Looks pretty clumsy, doesn't it? Without this spacesuit, I could run, jump, spin, dance. Now I'm barely able to lug forward. But with this spacesuit, I could walk on the moon, or on Mars, or just float about in outer space. Those dangerous cosmic rays wouldn't zap me. I get all the oxygen I need. And with these arms and gloves, I can still manipulate my surroundings. What you didn't know is that we need a spacesuit to walk on planet Earth as well. It's called a body. You need a personality too. The way you think, the way you feel. But none of these things are really you. They're just the spacesuit. You need them so you can work down here in a physical reality. But the real you is a godly soul.
Okay, so that's a nice video that gives us an analogy that we can relate to. We should never define ourselves as our bodies. Our bodies is a suit that we need in order to survive in this world. But the real us is a lot more than just our bodies. So now that we defined, point A was discussing who are we really? And we said, according to Judaism, there's a lot more than just a body. There's a consciousness, there's a godly soul. Based on that, we'll move on to step number 2, which discusses, do we die? And Steini, if you'd like to read B.
Do we die? We are pure divine energy contained in a body. When that body fails and dies, this energy is released and returns to its source. In this way, the soul lives on forever, unlimited, even after its physicality has been stripped away.
So the answer to the question, let's put it this way. When we ask, does the soul die? The answer to the question is, a soul is alive. Something that's alive cannot die. If it's alive, it's alive. The body was never alive. The body on its own doesn't survive. It's only the body having the soul together that allows it to survive. So when someone passes away, nothing that was alive died. It was something that was alive, that was connected with something that was dead, giving it the energy that it needed. And then when the energy goes away, the thing that was dead stays dead, and the thing that was alive stays alive. Think of it as a refrigerator getting electricity. When the electricity is going into the refrigerator, allows the refrigerator to function. If you unplug the refrigerator, do you say the refrigerator died? Do you say the electricity died? The electricity didn't die. Electricity cannot die. Electricity is constantly in existence. The refrigerator was always dead. It never had anything on its own. Only if electricity flows through it does it properly function. If it doesn't, then give it a few hundred years and it'll start disintegrating. It'll start falling apart. It might take a little longer than a body because it's metal, and the other aspects that it has to it will give it longer time for it to disintegrate. But ultimately, that which is dead was never alive. It was just getting energy from something that's always alive. So because we have a pure divine energy, that always stays alive. So back to the question, do we really die? Elia, what would you say?
I don't think so, because our soul, our body goes back to God, I guess, but our soul doesn't ever really die because I don't think it can.
Right, exactly. Souls, the term dying doesn't apply to a soul. Can you cut music with a knife? Can you blow up love? These are terms that do not apply to things that are not physical. A soul cannot die. It doesn't have a physical object that can be taken away from it in order for it to die. The soul will always live. So when we discuss death, it's the body that doesn't function anymore because it's not connected to the soul, but the soul completely lives on. Now we're going to get into a little bit deeper as to who we define ourselves. We'll get to that later in the class. What are we? Are we the soul or are we the body? But definitely the question of do we die is depends what? That which was always dead dies, and that which was always alive cannot die. Let's read over here the quote from the Mishnah Torah. This is from Maimonides. And Sheila, if you'd like to read over here.
The
Source
soul?
number. Yeah.
The soul is not a combination of the fundamental elements into which it will ultimately decompose, nor is it part of the life. Soul, so that it would be dependent upon the life. Soul as the life soul is dependent on the body. Rather, it is from God, from heaven.
Okay, now they made a mistake here. This additional paragraph is still a translation of the rest of the Hebrew. So continue reading that.
Okay. Therefore, when the matter of the body, which is a combination of the fundamental elements, decomposes and the life soul ceases to exist. For the life soul exists only together with this body and requires the body for all its deeds. This higher soul will not be cut off, for this soul is not dependent on the life soul for its deeds. Rather, it knows and comprehends knowledge which is above matter, knows the creator of all things, and exists where forever in his wisdom. Solomon gave this description, Ecclesiastes 12:7. The dust will return to the earth as it originally was, and the ruach will return to God who granted it.
Very good. So Maimonides here again defines that there's two souls. There's the soul that is the life soul, the one that's connected to the body. That one ceases to exist once the body passes on. But then there's the soul that is higher than it, connected exclusively to the body. That soul is what King Solomon refers to in Ecclesiastes, that he says that will return to God which granted it, meaning the God that gave the soul has the soul return to it because it was a part of God and it just goes back to its source. Let me let's use this analogy for a moment. If I gave you all a little box and I said in here there is a very dangerous disease, a very dangerous germ inside, I need you to destroy it. I need you to completely annihilate this box and its contents. What would you do? Can I get some offers of how would you destroy it? And I'll give you a hint. The trick question aspect is, I need you to completely destroy it. What do you do to completely destroy it? Anybody?
Well,
That's okay.
put it in acid. Acid destroys everything and makes it disappear, certain acids.
Right. So I'll answer as well for you guys. Let's say if someone says trash it, well, then it's in the trash and eventually it could get on an atmosphere. If you say flush it down the toilet, it's in the water and it'll be in the sewer system and it could get out in the atmosphere at one point or another. If you say burn it, it's in the ash. If you say put it in acid, it's in the acid. Now, how do you get rid of the acid which has it? It might be in a different form, but something that's physical can be destroyed. But something that is like an energy cannot be completely destroyed. You can change the form of what it looks like, but energy is never lost or destroyed. It's ultimately gonna just assume another form, but it's always gonna be there in one way or another. We cannot make something disappear. We could blow up something and then it turns into very small particles, but it's still there. It's just in a different form than it was before. This gives us a little bit of an idea of when we refer to the soul, you cannot completely destroy the soul. It is not something that can be destroyed. It just switches the form of what it was from one to the other. And let's look, there's a book here we'll quote about spiritual energy. And Elia, if you'd like to read, this is from a rabbi that wrote a book about Torah and science.
Spiritual energy. Fundamental to our understanding of the relationship between God and the world is the belief that all actions have consequences, whether good or bad. Any good that an individual does is ultimately rewarded, and any evil is ultimately punished. In the physical world, every action creates certain inevitable effects. The first law of thermodynamics, for example, the law of conservation of energy states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. Similarly, in the spiritual world, there is a law of conservation of spiritual energy, which we call kedusha, holiness. Nothing that the soul does goes away. Nothing of what the soul is ceases to be.
Very good. Once someone does a spiritual act, they do a kind act, there's nothing that can be done in the world that can take it away. If I bought a home, it could be taken away from me. There could be a flood, there could be a fire, there could be an insurance claim, there could be a scam. There's many ways it could be taken away because it's a physical item. Spiritual energy can never be taken away. Once someone performed a mitzvah, they did something, it's there forever. It brought a holiness to the world. There's nothing that can counter that. So too, when it comes to physical energy, he's using that as the analogy. Physical energy, it's not about destroying it or taking it away. It's about, can you conserve the energy? Everything that their scientists are trying to do is, how do I harness the energy that already exists from the sun or from the water when they use that at a dam to make energy, or the nuclear power? These are energies that exist. I'm just not using it in order to produce something that I can benefit from. And that's why I'm trying to develop it in a way that I can use it for my benefit. So what we have done as a soul never ceases to exist. And let's pull up over here this slide, which will have it just in a phrase. And Stern, if you'd like to read it.
Nothing of what the soul is ceases to be.
What the soul represents and what it is never goes away. And let's use an analogy over here. I think, let me see if there's a photo here in the student book. Just so we'll, oh, no, so there's no photo of it. But let me ask you a question. If I were to bring a helium balloon, what is allowing the balloon, and I weigh it down with something. Let's say I put a little ball, something that's holding it down on the table, and the balloon is floating as high as it could go, but ultimately the string is attached and is making it not go up higher. What is stopping the balloon from going up to as high as it would like to? Anybody?
The weight
Right,
of
the
the
weight.
ball.
What is making the balloon want to go up? What's other than the weight? What is on its own? What is causing the balloon to fly? What is in the balloon that makes it fly?
The helium gas.
Very good, the helium gas. Now imagine I were to pop the balloon, and then what would happen as soon as I pop the balloon? The helium gas, does it disappear? And what happens to the balloon? The material that the balloon was made of. So everybody knows the helium gas will go up and the balloon will just go down and fall onto the floor. Now, what happened all of a sudden? Is the helium gas still here? Yes. Is the balloon still here? Yes. But why is it all of a sudden the balloon not flying high? Because the helium gas is not anymore constrained within the balloon. Once the balloon is popped, the helium gas is free to do what it wants to do. What does it do on its own? What does helium gas do? It goes higher and higher forever and ever. It goes faster and it goes in an unlimited way. It just travels as helium would do. Only when the helium is constrained within the balloon does it stay down and it's forced to be here. The same is true with the soul. As long as it's in the body, what does the soul constantly try to do? It tries to lift up the body, to bring it up to spirituality. Just as the helium in the balloon says, balloon, don't go down where you want to go. Lift yourself up, become better, fly in the sky, reach greater heights. So the soul in the body is trying to lift the body upwards towards a more meaningful, spiritual pursuits that are truly the mission of why the body is here. But once the body dies, which is the equivalent of the popping of the balloon, the soul is released. And where does the soul go? Just like the helium. It still exists. It's just not anymore constrained. To a certain degree, the soul is more free. The soul can go to extreme heights where it was not able to reach while it was in the body. Where does the balloon go? It just falls right back down. Where does the body go? It falls back to the ground and it disintegrates. Now let's move on to the next question. Point number C. Sheila, if you'd like to read C,
Well, oh.
it should be on your
But
screen.
will we die? Our identity is shaped by the things we choose to do, think, and say. We have the power through Torah and mitzvah to create an identity of righteousness that is connected and attuned to God. When we do this, the real us will indeed live on.
Very good. So now the question is, this is what we asked before. Okay, so you describe that there is a soul in us. The soul never dies. The soul can reach greater heights. It's not dependent upon the balloon aspect. It's helium or it's a godly aspect. But who are we? How would I define myself? Am I a body or am I a soul? What do I really define myself as? What is the true core of the essence of myself? Let's pull up over here this slide. And Layla, if you'd like to read, it should pull up on the screen in one moment. Oh, yeah, there we go. There we go.
Am I a soul with a body or body with a soul?
What's your thoughts on that?
Soul with a body based on this class.
Right. No, that's what the class is really coming to teach us, which changes not just the aspect of how we look at ourselves after life, but it's so much within our life. Getting angry at someone else. If someone's getting angry at someone else, they're getting upset, they're screaming at them, even if they don't scream at them, but they're fuming inside. Ask yourself, are they identifying themselves as a body with a soul, or are they identifying themselves as a soul with a body? If you're a soul with a body, you say, of course a soul doesn't care. You think helium cares about these aspects? You think a spiritual energy, something that cannot be destroyed, is bothering itself with such stupidity? But someone that identifies himself as a body and he has the soul that disturbs him once in a while from pursuing his own pleasures, and it gives him these guilty feelings which he wishes were never there, then of course these things can bother him. So it's in every aspect of our life. How do we look at ourselves? So this is after we figured out that there is a part of us that will not die, just the body will die. So we have to ask ourselves, what about me? Do I even know my soul? Will I know myself after I die? Meaning, will I be able to identify myself as the soul after I die? Or will I look at my soul and say, I don't really know you. We didn't really have any connection during our lifetime. I don't feel like you're me. I feel like the clothing I had, the house I was in, the car I drove, that's me, and that's not here anymore. So I'm gone. In other words, as I know myself today, will I continue to exist or die? Steini, what's your thoughts on that? The way you know yourself today, does that live on or does that die?
Well, I guess that will die.
So the answer, which I would suggest, and you'll tell me how you feel about this, and I'll give an analogy as well, is that answer to the question of the way you know yourself today, will you live or die, is only up to you to know. Meaning it's depending on your actions. It depends on how you identify yourself during your life, which will define what will you be after you pass away. If you identify yourself during your lifetime as accumulating wealth, having a lot of parties and drinking and smoking and everything else that's physical, then yes, after you pass away, there isn't really going to be much left. Your soul will be speaking a different language, and you guys won't have a lot in common. But if your soul feels that he is the one that is the main focus of your life, and you're investing a lot of something that matters, that lives forever, then you never die, because who are really you? You're really a godly soul that lives on forever. Let's use an analogy which works well with technology that we have today. So if I were to tell you, write up on a Google document, a page, basic information, your first name, your last name, your primary relationship, your primary occupation, your hobby, you write basic information. Now I tell you, destroy the phone. Let's say you completely destroy the phone, even though we discussed, you blow it up. Does that information that you wrote down still exist, or does it not exist? You wrote it down on the phone in a Google Doc and you destroyed it. Does it still exist or not? Who would like
Yeah.
to give their input? I heard someone say no. Sheila, was that you?
No, I said yes.
Oh, yes, meaning it does still exist?
Well, if you just wrote it down, and I mean, if you write it on a piece of paper and you burn the paper, it doesn't mean that you don't have the same name and the same relationship and the same whatever.
Right. So the question was specifically writing it on a device of technology, like you write
Well,
it on.
even well,
Right.
I
you
mean,
write.
but
Oh, sorry.
but there were people before there were computers, you know.
Right. So the question wasn't, does the person exist? The question was that information that you wrote down,
Yeah.
does that still exist if you destroyed the phone?
Well,
on which-
you know, like we have the Declaration of Independence, and it still exists. Was, you know, and then there were things that were destroyed. Not weren't there things, papers that were destroyed, but you know that certain things existed.
Right. So correct. By a paper, I think everybody would agree that if I wrote information on a paper and I destroyed the paper, I burnt it, let's say, the paper and the information on the paper doesn't exist anymore. The ideas of what I wrote about in the paper, meaning destroying the paper doesn't kill the person that I wrote about, but the paper still won't exist. The question was specifically in technology, do I say that if I destroy the phone on which it was written, it's completely obliterated forever, that information, like a paper, or does it still exist? But Layla, I saw you also wanted to share an input.
Oh yeah, well I agree. And I think like even if it was just an idea you have and you wrote it down on a piece of paper and then burned it, you still have that idea. And I don't know, I feel like it's very like Plato. I just learned in school like Plato and his forms and how ideas are more real than the physical thing. So that's like the
Right.
same thing here.
So I guess I'm not clarifying the question. It's not discussing if the idea is destroyed. The question was that piece of that paper or that document that I wrote, is it destroyed by breaking the phone? Meaning,
Can
Yeah.
if I assume that when I burn a paper, it is destroyed. If I break the phone on which it was written, is the document destroyed? That would be the question.
I guess if you sign in from a different device in the same Google account, you can still pull it up.
Oh, very good. So we're heading down the right track, and I would clarify, and I would say, if you're a little familiar with how the internet works, if the device was connected to the cloud, meaning if the device that I wrote it on was connected to the internet, then when I write down on my Google document this information, it automatically gets backed up in the cloud. It gets backed up on my Google Drive. And therefore, if I destroy the phone which I used to access that document is broken, but the document still exists because it's in the cloud. However, if my phone was not connected to the internet at the time that I wrote down that information, it wasn't connected to the cloud, then when I destroy the phone, there is no way for me to access that information. Correct, Sterny? You could only access it from another Google document if it's connected to the internet, right?
Yes.
So too, I think this is a beautiful analogy for how we view our bodies and our souls. If you say, well, me, who I am, will I exist after I pass away? The question is up to you. Were you connected to the cloud or were you not connected to the cloud? If you, during your lifetime, are very into just your device, you're not into any clouds, any godly things, spiritual souls, you say, I'm just into physical items, restaurants, food, cars, clothing, that's what I am, then you're clearly not connected to the internet. And then as soon as the body gets destroyed, the body passes away, then there is nothing that's left over. Or we'll say in general, everybody has to some degree, they're connected to the cloud, but most of your information of your life does not go on because it was never connected to the cloud. But if you were connected to the cloud, which means your entire life was a soul life, your life was mostly focused on putting information in the cloud, things that could last forever. The device was used as a tool to access the cloud, meaning you used your phone, but you didn't make your entire life into the phone. You said the phone just gives me access to the internet, to the World Wide Web, to the unlimited information that there is online. I need to use my phone to access that. Then if my phone breaks, I have everything backed up. I could get another phone and I'm back on track in a minute versus the person that never had any internet. They lose their phone, they're gone. They don't have any phone numbers, they don't have any documents, no information. So when we find meaning and fulfill the purpose of our lives, then we become solely people, meaning we become people of the soul. And therefore we identify with our soul. It becomes a part of who I am. And therefore it becomes our daily consciousness. Such as consciousness will never die, just as the idea of a consciousness will never die, will never cease to exist, so too I will never cease to exist. I will only shed the dead weight, meaning I'll drop off what was holding me down and I'll move on to a newer iPhone. I'll move on to a newer device that doesn't require a physical object to access it. I'll become a soul that somehow new technology will be that I can access the internet without a phone. Somehow my brain just accesses internet. Imagine we had that new technology. That's what a soul is. Soul eventually is saying, I have everything stored in the cloud. I can access it without the physical device of the phone. Let's read a text inside that brings out this idea. Of course, it's not the same exact because this is before technology that this text was written. So this is from Rabbeinu Tam. He was a grandson of Rashi's. He lived about 800 years ago. And Layla, if you'd like to read it, please.
The soul returns to its place. Know that the Creator caused the soul to emanate from his own power, and he breathed it into the body of man after he brought it into the world in the midst of these celestial wheels, just as men enclose the air in a skin bottle. Therefore, when the soul separates from the body, if it is pious and pure, it returns to its place, and it passes from the celestial wheels to beyond them, like a bird that has been snared in an evil trap. When it escapes, it returns to its nest. But if the soul is a sinful one, then it is like a bird whose wing has been cut and it cannot fly. It nests in the side of the mouth of a pit. It falls into a deep abyss and cannot get out of that abyss until its wings grow and it is able to fly. So the sinful soul cannot ascend because of the weight of the sins which burden it and will not permit it to ascend to its place.
Very good. So this is a beautiful example he gives. So we just gave it in technology, but he says if you are properly, while you're in your body, then you will be free and you'll be yourself, versus if your wings get cut off, you have to wait for the wings to regrow. So when we speak about heaven and hell, it's referring to there are those that can right away go to heaven, and there are those that need time. Hell is a place where they regrow your wings, a place where they give the soul the same freshness that it used to have. Think of it as a washing machine, where if you went to a party and you were all clean, you didn't get yourself dirty, you were careful not to spill the chocolate on your clothing, you don't need to wash the clothing after. But if you went there and you rolled in the dirt and you poured all the chocolate and mousse all over your clothing, you'll need a washing machine. And if you got yourself really dirty, you'll have to do an extremely rough cycle, that, you know, the extra detergent and the extra spins and the double the time because you got yourself extra dirty. So it's not a punishment like revenge, but rather it's a place where someone can clean themselves up and get back to where they should really be. And here, let's read a quote from Maimonides. Shani, if you'd like to read this one.
Mishnah Torah Repentance 8. The good that is hidden for the righteous is the life of the world to come. This will be life which is not accompanied by death, and good which is not accompanied by evil. The Torah alludes to this in the promise, Deuteronomy 22:7, so that good will be granted to you and you will live long. The oral tradition explains, so that good will be granted you in the world that is entirely good, and you will live long. In the world which is endlessly long, the world to come. The reward of the righteous is that they will merit the pleasure and take part in this good. The retribution of the wicked is that they will not merit this life, rather they will be cut off and die. Since this life is not accompanied by death, for death is an event associated with the body alone, and in the realm And in that realm, there is no body. It is called the bond of life, as I Samuel 25:29 states, and the soul of my master will be bound up in the bond of life. This is the reward above which there is no higher reward, and the good beyond which there can be, the other good. This was the good desired by all the prophets.
There you go. So he explains over here this idea of the righteous live on because of who they are aligning their soul with. Their soul is connected with God, and therefore it can live on forever. Let me show you here a clip, and let's pull it up over here.
I once saw a policeman trying to deal with a drunken man who was causing a scene. The poor fellow repeatedly shouted that he wanted to kill himself. The policeman asked him, why? Because all I want is to be happy. Happy? If you kill yourself, you're going to be dead. And if you're dead, how will you know you're happy? You're dead. Huh? If I kill myself, I'm going to be dead. And if I'm dead, how will I know I'm happy? I'm dead. That's right. Oh man, I can't even kill myself and be happy. A sad story, but completely true. Of course, suicide is not the secret to happiness, but in truth, a soul never dies. You see, the true you is a soul. You don't have a soul, you are a soul. And a soul is like an actor playing a role in a film. Imagine an actor who gets a part he so much wanted to play, but when he reads through the script, he discovers his character is going to die. He panics and complains to the director, I can't play this part. I don't want to die. Are you crazy? You're not going to die. Your character dies, and then you get up and win an Oscar. You are a soul. You aren't given a role to play in this world, a character you happily wanted to play. Embrace your part, but don't get lost in the character. The character will age, but you, soul, are ageless. The character will die, but you, soul, will never die.
I think that's a beautiful clip showing us how it's not ever that the person in who they really are is dying. They're switching roles. You switch roles from one actor to another. You used to act as a person in this world with a body in a certain location, and then you move on to another actor as a soul, and you come back maybe in a few years from now as another body. There's one more clip I'll show you here, also aligned with the same idea. Let's pull that up over here.
Thank you for coming, Rabbi.
Ray will be missed by us all.
He was the light of my life.
Was it sudden?
Sunstroke. Devastating. Here today, gone tomorrow. Gone forever.
Ray's not gone. He's alive and happier in a higher world closer to the truth.
Doesn't feel like it to me.
Death is really birth. It's not the end, but the beginning of a new worldview.
Worldview?
Yes, the world as it appears to us is actually a world view, a diminished perception of the sun that was created by the sun with these dark sunglasses that we all wear.
What are sunglasses?
We exist only because these sunglasses reduce our vision of the sun and screen us from the overwhelming power of his whole truth. Without them, we would be obliterated by his omnipresence.
The sun puts sunglasses on us to limit our perception?
Yes. And that's why every person, thing, and event appears as if independent, separated by time and space from each other and from the sun.
Wait, you say appears. That's not actually true?
No, there's really nothing but the sun. And we are rays of his light existing within him. All are one with the sun and one with each other within the sun.
So it's like what Albert Einstein said. Space and time are not conditions in which we live. They are simply modes in which we think.
Exactly. Our perception of time and space is a created, limited mode of thinking, but it's not forever. When we die, our perception dramatically expands because the darkness of our sunglasses, which limits our perspective, is radically decreased.
If the world as we see it is actually a perception, then we are really not in the world, rather the world is in us?
Yes, death is like waking up from a dream. The world you thought you were in was really in you.
Is the world we wake up in also a perception?
Yes. Life is a journey of endless awakenings to more expanded, enlightened worldviews, coming ever closer to the truth. We are actually dying to live and living to die.
Forgive me, Rabbi, but life after death sounds better than life before death. Should we then want to die sooner than later?
Definitely not. In our journey of expanding awareness, every step is precious and necessary. Each new bit of revealed truth prepares us for the next partial yet wider perceived worldview.
So should I be happy for Ray or sad?
Be sad for you, but happy for Ray. Cry and mourn your loss. But in your heart be consoled that your loss was his gain.
Thank you for your comforting words, Rabbi. They are a glimmer of hope.
Okay. So let's move on to the next part of the class, which is, okay, so we described that the soul continues to live on. Now, what happens if I don't see myself wanting to be a soul? If I find it pretty boring to be a soul, I say yes, you say if you're not into the physical items. What happens if I say I tried spiritual items, I tried living a life more aligned with God, it doesn't entertain me, I would rather, as some smokers will say, you tell them smoking dies, they say, I'd rather live 50 years of smoking cigarettes than 100 years without cigarettes. So some will say, well, I'd rather live a shorter life and enjoy my physical needs than live a longer life but not have my physical needs met. What would we explain to this question, which is, of course, a very valid question, but it comes with a lot of misconceptions. So let's start with D. Elia, if you'd like to read D, and then the following two short paragraphs.
Ultimate pleasure. Ironically, the body gets in the way of real pleasure. Our physicality creates resistance to anything else the bodily enjoyment and satisfaction. Anything else than bodily enjoyment and satisfaction. Once the body fades, so does the resistance, and true pleasure can be found. Is this experience enjoyable? It sounds nice and holy, but to tell you the truth, I'm not sure I want to be in school the whole day learning Torah, as beautiful as it may seem. In order to get the answer to the question, we need to better understand what is pleasure and what is pain.
Right. So
do I read that?
Yes, that's perfect. So we just described that the soul has so much more to it. But the question is, what happens if I'm very aligned with my body and I'm happy about it? I feel like I don't want to pursue the soul's pleasure. Is it really enjoyable to do what the soul wants? What happens if it doesn't align with me? How could you say that this is something I want to do if I don't want to do it? So let's understand a little bit what is real pleasure and what is pain. So Layla, if you'd like to read for me these questions and give me a short answer to these questions in the activity.
What daily activity gives you the most physical pain? Why? Waking up early in the morning for school. What daily activity gives you the most mental stress? Why? Probably something having to do with schoolwork.
Right, okay.
What activity gives you the most emotional stress and why? I don't really have an activity that, I don't know. What class at school gives you the most pain and why? French, because my teacher bullies me for no reason. I'm so good at French. It's ridiculous. Okay. That was a little venting session. Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Très bien. So,
Merci. Oh mon Dieu.
So I'll give you a hint. The answer to these questions is really within the words themselves. And notice that it's always the stress. The reason why you hate the French is because your teacher gives you stress for no reason. Notice that it's not about, you could have two students in the same class. One of them says this is the best class ever, and the other says this is the worst class ever. How would you define the difference between them? One of them enjoys the class, and one of them feels pain in the class because they don't want to be there. They don't enjoy the subject. They're feeling pushback. It's painful for them because they're stressed. Stress means there's friction and resistance. Think of it as if you have to lift up your finger, it's not painful. But if you have to try bending your finger backwards, continue bending it backwards, and you'll notice the more resistance, the more pain. This is very logical. If someone bent your finger back just a drop, it's a little bit of resistance I can manage. But if they bent it all the way back, you would say my finger's broken. It really, really hurts. So the more resistance we have to something, the more painful it is. So now, getting into that mode, we can understand that any type of pain, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional, anything that's giving us pain, it's the more we don't want to be in a certain class or be around a certain person, the more painful it is. That's why one person can say, it's the love of my life to be around this person. And the other person says, I'll be found dead before I'm hanging out with that person. And the question is, well, is this person good or bad? How could two people have such different opinions? And the answer is, they're speaking regarding what gives them resistance. One person says, why am I happy? The happiness is the opposite of resistance and friction. Pleasure comes from a time when you feel released, when you feel like you could just be in your element, you can be yourself, you can let loose, which is why so many people are happy with dancing. It allows them to forget about other aspects. You don't sit there and dance with music thinking about all your stress and reviewing your French class. You sit there and you say, I'm just going to focus on the music. I'm going to allow the least resistance to what I want to do, and that's what gives me pleasure. So the more we allow to release the resistance and friction, the more pleasure we have. The things that we hate the most are the things that are the most stressful for us. Stress in the literal sense of pushing against what we want to do. Now, if we can understand that, that allows us to realize that a lot of the things we experience as resistance and of pain and stress, it's because our body is controlling as to what we want to do. The body is very selfish, and the body says, I have a list of things that give me enjoyment and satisfaction. Anything that's not aligned with that, I will push back. I will make you miserable until you satisfy my selfish desires. So if you were to imagine that you can somehow release your body, if you can somehow say, body, you know, you're just one of the opinions I have. There's someone else in here, and I'll sometimes give you what you need, but I also would like to sometimes give to someone else. If you would identify the body as someone else, not as yourself, there would be so many things that you would find pleasurable and enjoyable. But the more we are addicted to our body, the body blinds us, and it says, I'd rather just engage in things that give me pleasure, like eating, sleeping. Notice that you have a hard time getting up out of bed in the morning because there's resistance. The body says, I just want to sleep. Let me do what I find enjoyable. But when you're waking up to do something exciting that your body wants to do, if you're going on some exciting trip to Israel or whatever else you're looking to hang out in, your body is more than willing to comply because it says, oh, we're aligned together. I'm doing something that I want to do, and therefore I'm in it. So if we could release the body, then we'll release a lot of the pain. Based on that, we can understand, let's pull up over here the slide. And you should be able to see that on your screen. Let's make sure, yeah. So how would we feel when there's no body to resist the spiritual bliss? And the answer is, if there was no body that's resisting and giving us the anxiety, giving us the stress, telling us he doesn't like what we're doing, then of course we would enjoy it. That's where we would really be aligned with our spiritual side. And we would say, yes, this is something I enjoy. So our perception of what we don't enjoy is because we're so aligned with our body. But once we reach heaven, once we release the body, we release the dead weight that's holding us back, our perspective on what we enjoy will change, because we'll say, I don't have any more those selfish desires that are looking to pull me back in the opposite direction. So our current perspective and experience is simply so limited and so tied down to the body that it's difficult for us to envision anything different than what we currently experience. Think of it as even in our own lives, children versus adults. How many times children say, I don't know in the world why an adult would do that. Who would drink wine? Some children say, it doesn't make any sense to me why an adult would go to school willingly on their own. I don't understand why someone would do many aspects of what adults do. And then as an adult, we say, oh, you just don't get it because you're a child. So too, we are as children. And once our body gets released, our soul is able to say, oh, now finally I'm a true adult. Let's read these words. Fascinating how Maimonides writes up this exact idea in his book as well. Let's pull it up over here on the screen. And oh, there we go. And Sheila, if you'd like to read.
Lest over there.
Yeah.
Lest you think lightly of this good, the world to come, imagining the reward for the mitzvah and for the person following completely the paths of truth is for him to eat and drink good food, have us with beautiful forms, wear garments of linen and lace, dwell in ivory palaces, use utensils of gold and silver or other similar ideas, as conceived by the foolish, decadent Arabs who are flooded with lewdness. In contrast, the sages and the men of knowledge know that all these matters are vain and empty things without any purpose. They are only considered of great benefit to us in this world because we possess a body and a physical form. All these matters are the needs of the body. The soul only desires them and lusts for them because of the needs of the body, so that its desires will be fulfilled and its health maintained. In a situation where there is no body, all of these matters will be nullified. There.
Right there, yeah, you're over there.
Sorry. There is no way in this world to grasp and comprehend the ultimate good, which the soul will experience in the world to come. We only know bodily good, and that is what we desire. However, the ultimate good is overwhelmingly great and cannot be compared to the good of the world except in a metaphoric sense. In truth, there is no way to compare the good of the soul in the world to come to bodily goods of the world. Rather, that good is infinitely great with no comparison or likeness. This is alluded to by David's statement, Psalm 31:20. How great is the good that you have hidden for those who fear you.
There you go. So he explains this clearly, how we cannot understand it because we could be blinded by the bodily needs. But once someone allows themselves to see truly beautiful, they'll understand that the pleasures of the world are not comparable to the ultimate pleasures. And let's read here again from Rabbeinu Tam, another quote. Stern, if you'd like to read it.
The world to come is beyond the celestial spheres that revolve above us. The world to come is wide and endless, without darkness, but with a great light, which is not similar to the light of the world. This world is like a cave in a wilderness, a cave beneath the earth. And as for this cave, he who dwells in it thinks that there is no other world except this, because he has not seen what is outside. But if he came out there, he would see broad lands and the heavens and the great seas, the luminaries and the stars. Similarly, a man in this world thinks that there is no other world, but if he were to go out of his cave, he would see the width of the world to come and the precious beauty of its greatness.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you. Let me show here a nice clip, video. Explain. Oh, there we go.
Cher Cité, j'ai parfois de la difficulté à m'entendre le soir parce que je pense à l'amour.
Qu'arriverait-il quand je meurs? Le judaïsme croit-il à la vie après la mort? Y a-t-il un paradis et un enfer? Ou c'est le feu une fois qu'on meurt? J'attends ta réponse avec impatience. Je commence à voir sommeil. Merci, Michel de Paris. Sorry, 1 second. Sorry about that. I was just suddenly overcome with the urge for a croissant. Yes, Michelle, Judaism definitely believes in life after death, but it's like nothing you ever heard about before. For us, heaven and hell is actually the same place, called Olam Haba, or the world to come. And although I can't tell you about it from personal experience, this parable might help you better understand it. Imagine the symphony's coming to town. 1 second. Imagine the symphony's coming to town, and you just happen to love classical music. You decide to take advantage of this great opportunity, and in the weeks leading up to the concert, you listen to every song that will be played over and over again, increasing your appreciation. The big day finally arrives, you get to the concert, and it's amazing. Every note, every chord is sweet and beautiful and sheer ecstasy to you. But let's say you have a friend that doesn't like classical music quite as much as you do. He thinks it's okay. He listens to your CD a couple times. Big day comes, he gets to the concert and generally likes the music, but you do catch him checking his watch every now and again. But then there's your other friend who despises classical music. And when she finds out the symphony's coming to town, she says that she'd never be caught dead there. But the thing is, you're all dead and you're in that concert forever. So what does this all mean? The same experience could be blissful to one person and torturous to another. Just replace the concert with basking in the presence of godliness. For the person who spent his life doing good things that brought him close to God, we call them mitzvos. Basking in divine light is an incredible experience. For the person who is basically good all around, but didn't specifically try to connect, the experience will be fine, not particularly good or bad. But for the person that hated and did everything in opposition to mitzvahs during his lifetime, for someone like this, being so close to the source of such light will be a very painful experience. So I don't know about you, but until I get to the concert, I'm doing my best to increase my classical music appreciation.
Okay. So that's an analogy to help us understand a little bit of how we view the world to come and if it's something we desire. Let's move on to a beautiful story, which is not exactly along the same lines, but it's just a general story about the idea of death and how we should view it. And Layla, if you'd like to read it, please.
Yeah, can I ask a clarifying question though?
Sure.
So there's no like heaven, hell, it's just ha'olam haba. And it's a different experience depending on who you were in the, is there any like purgatory and then once you serve that time you get to heaven, or like just
No, it's a good question. So think of it as not a place where someone is paid back for every time they did something wrong, a place of revenge. But there is no, it's not a physical place because souls don't go to physical places. A soul doesn't get burned by fire. If someone gets burned, it's their body that gets burned. A soul doesn't get burned because fire cannot destroy a soul. Can you burn love? Love is not something that's burnable. So when we say the concept of hell, where it gives purgatory, fires, and torture and pain, it's just using analogies that we can understand. Some people will like to describe it in more detail because it helps them align themselves with the proper route to do the right things. Because if they think of, oh, if I do this, I'll be caught and sent to prison, that helps them stop. So if you say, if you do this, you'll get punished with an extremely hot fire, it helps them stop. But there is no heavenly fire because fire is not something that's in heaven. A soul doesn't go to take a flight to a specific place. There's no tunnels in the ground that the soul escapes through and it travels to this place, and either he enters a physical location of purgatory or heaven, but rather it's a soul experience. So a soul that behaved properly, when he comes to heaven, like in the analogy we had in this video, similar idea, they watch a video of their life. They watch an experience with God. If they behave accordingly, when they go through this experience, they're like, wow, look how great I was. I'm watching and I'm just basking in enjoyment, seeing how I passed test after test, seeing how I accomplished and reached every goal that God wanted me to reach. I made it on time without complaints, and I see exactly how God wanted my life to be. I see how my life was, and they're so aligned. They're so note for note going up and down exactly how God prescribed my life to be, the way he envisioned it. That's the way I live. That's like heaven for the soul. That's connecting with God, being completely clean, coming up to a place where he can fit right in. There's no cleansing period. He doesn't need to forget about his old ways. But then you can have a soul that comes to heaven and he completely doesn't know the language. He says, I don't even know what you guys are doing. I can't communicate. And they say, oh my gosh, you got so dirty. There requires a lot of information that needs to be taken care of. A lot of washing machines that your soul needs to go through. A lot of sanitization to clarify, clean up, and bring your soul back to its pristine state. And it's a sense of fire of shame, which the soul experiences, that he watches his life's experience, and then he watches the way God predicted, meaning not God predicted, but God desired his life to be, and they're so misaligned, and he sits there so ashamed and embarrassed of himself. I can't believe that so many times I thought I had no choice about it. So many times I thought it was too difficult, and I have to respond, and I have to fight back, and I have to ignore, and I have to be jealous, and I have to steal, or whatever it is that a person committed. And he said, now that I see God's view of how my life was supposed to be, I'm so ashamed that I didn't realize if I just pushed myself a drop more, I was just over the hill. I was at the top, and I could have made it easily over. So God's not sitting there looking to punish anyone. God is looking like a healthy parent. If I'll give you this analogy, a parent tells a child, "Don't run around barefoot, lest you get a splinter." And the child ignores, he doesn't listen, so he runs around. And sure enough, he gets a splinter. The father has to take the child to the doctor, and the doctor has to take out these sharp tools, and he's cutting open, and this child's screaming in pain. He said, listen, there's an infection in here. We got to take it out. You have to put antibiotics, and you have to be off your leg for a few weeks, and they put on bandages. And it's a whole terrible experience for the child. He can't play around. A few days later, the child is finally back on. And this time, he's running around barefoot. The father tells the child, don't run around barefoot. You might get a splinter. And the child says, oh, no, I won't get a splinter. I'm okay. So the father realizes nothing's working. He says, if you don't put on your shoes, you might get a splinter, and then I'll have to take you to the doctor, and he'll have to cut open and clean out that infection. The child freaks out, and he runs, and he puts on his shoes. The child is a child, and therefore he wasn't scared of getting a splinter. He didn't realize that the splinter is the problem. The doctor is not the problem. The doctor is the solution. The problem was that he got a splinter. The doctor is helping him rectify getting back to his health that he should be before he got the splinter. Who should the child fear? He shouldn't fear the doctor. He should fear the splinter. But because he's a child, the only thing he remembers is the cleaning process. And he says, oh, I don't want to be clean. A child doesn't realize when he gets dirty at dinner, that's what makes your parent need to wash you up. It's not that they just choose to pick you up and bring you to the sink to wash you up because they're just terrible people. If you choose not to get dirty, there would be no need to be clean. So we shouldn't be scared of a sin because, oh my gosh, God's going to have to clean me. He's going to have to give me this rectification. He's going to have to cleanse me. And I'm so scared of this cleaning process to make me forget of all the dirt that I accumulated through my life. I should be scared of the sin because the sin is the problem. The cleaning process is something that as a child, maybe that scares me because the child doesn't know of anything other than the cleaning process. But as a mature adult, I should say, I don't do it because I know it's wrong. I don't want to splinter. I don't do the sin because it's against God. The fact that he'll have to clean me That's like as a last resort might get me to stop doing the wrong thing, but that's not why I don't do it. Meaning, in other words, I tell this to people, if God made an announcement one day, a heavenly voice, and he says, guys, purgatory is full. There's no more room for anyone. There were way too many sinners the past few thousand years. From now on, there's not going to be any more punishment for sins. It's still a sin. And for those that do not do the right thing, I still do not want you to do it. However, I'm letting you know I'll sign a contract. I won't punish you anymore for doing the sin. I don't want you to do it. It's against my will, but there won't be any consequences. How many people would say, God, are you serious? Like, I'm in. I'm going to do everything I can do that's against you, because if there's no punishment, why would I stop myself? What does that show? If someone says that, I can understand where they're coming from, but you would say you had a very childish experience with God. You didn't really want to serve God. You were scared of getting the doctor. So as soon as you found out that the doctor won't be available, you said, oh, I'll run around the whole day and get splinters. I don't care. The doctor said he'll never treat me again. He promised me that even if I get splinters, I won't get any more treatments. That's a very foolish approach. You're ruining yourself. It's not about you're ruining God. You're ruining yourself. You should be appreciative if it's there. So if heaven was closed, and not heaven, if hell was closed, one shouldn't say, well, if it's for sure closed, I'll do whatever I want. I'm serving God because I'm a mature adult, and I know that a God is worthy of serving. Because he created me, I was created to serve him, and therefore I'll do it. If there is a punishment and there is reward, that's an added benefit and a bonus, and it should encourage me to do the right thing. And if I did the wrong thing, it's not about feeling hopeless. It's about saying, wow, even if I did the wrong thing, I'm so glad that God is always willing to fix up those mistakes that have been done. So it's not to deny the concept of reward and punishment. It's to understand it in a new way. It's not about some evil person that can't control his anger and saying, I was waiting for the day that you came into my control so I can let out all my anger at you because you got me so upset and you were just too far out of my grasp. But now that you're in my grasp and you're in my reach, here's the end of you. God forbid that's the way it is. God tells us not to take revenge, and at least attribute to God minimal what a healthy parent has to their child. And no healthy parent would tell their child, you didn't listen to me and you didn't put on shoes. You're just gonna have to figure it out yourself. You're gonna have to make your own operation. You have to get your own antibiotics. So I hope that answers your question. We could speak about it more. There's a lot to it, but let's just finish. We have a drop more for this class. Does that answer it?
Thank you. Yes, that was helpful.
Okay, so let's move on to point number E. And with this, we'll finish. Steiny, if you could read point number E.
The life you have now is precious, for it gives you the opportunity to fulfill God's will in a body. Without body, tangible spiritual impact on earth is out of reach.
So the question is, if it's so good, the heavenly experience, why are we in a body? Why don't we just move forward and go into the next world, go into this blissful place? So one video here you can see on the screen, I'm skipping it. It's a nice video. We had it in the first class. You could go back and watch that regarding comparing electricity to our soul. We had it then regarding God. Here we have it just regarding the soul and the afterlife. But let's move on to the last part. So Steiny, aligned with what you just read, read this quote on the screen.
If afterlife is when we experience the ultimate pleasure, why don't we speed up the process?
Right, why don't we just make it quick? So Sheila, if you could read the next photo. Oh. There we go.
Happy
Now,
retirement. What's wrong with this picture?
what do you think is wrong with this picture of this girl retiring? I would give
Well,
her.
obviously she's young, so she's
Right.
writing, so unless she's giving it to somebody.
Right. So we would assume if she's so young, why are you retiring? It's not like retirement is the ultimate goal and a person doesn't want to do anything. Because even young people that are born into wealthy families, still, they don't retire at age 13. They still want to work and do something. As humans, the right job for us now is to be in this world. When we're done our task in this world, we move on to the next world. And that's when the time comes to have the next role as our actor. Like we mentioned before, we're an actor. We're given different roles by different managers. So The ultimate purpose of the soul is fulfilled during the lifetime it spends in this world, making this world a God-conscientious, good place. The world to come, Olam Haba, where the soul is going to be, that's like the retirement. That's when you reap the rewards for the deeds that a person has done in earth by reliving the lives that we had in this world, just without the constraints of the body. So it's not like we should jump onto the next world, because there's only going to be in retirement what you put away during your work years. And just like retirement is based on the choices you make during your earlier years, so the trajectory of our journey in the world to come is entirely based off the choices we made during our lifetime. There's a little more to it, because we're ultimately not just serving God in order to get the reward. The reward is an outcome, but we're serving God even if there was no reward. The reward is an added benefit. So as much as the world to come is a great place, we don't want to go there before the time, because it's not when we're supposed to be there. Our job is really in this world, to make this world a better place. And the world to come is the next step. When we arrive there, we'll enjoy it. Let's pull up over here. This is where we're. So we read this. And Sheila, if you could read the story.
The Rebbe once spoke to a mother who was inconsolable after the loss of her son. He asked her, "What if I told you that your son isn't dead? Rather, he has gone to a place where he is safe and happy. He feels no pain. He has no fear and no regrets. You can't see him, but you can send him love packages, and he will receive them and enjoy them. If I were you, this would if I told you this, would things be different?" She thought about it and answered, "Well, I guess the pain would not be so unbearable if I knew he was safe and I could tell him that I love him." "Well," the Rebbe told her, this is in fact the case. Your son is in heaven where he is at peace, and he can still feel your love. The love packages you sent to him are the mitzvah and the good deeds you do in his memory and in his honor. When you give a coin to charity, say a prayer, light a Sabbath candle, learn some Jewish text, or show kindness to those in need, and you have him in mind, he receives a flow of love from you. His soul is elevated when you perform good deeds in his memory. Channel your grief into a positive force. Let the vacuum caused by your loss draw more light into the world.
Yeah, so this is a beautiful story, basically explaining how the soul is not in pain. And of course, for us, it's painful that we cannot experience them the way we used to, but we should know that we can still give gifts to them. We can still benefit and have that relationship with them. Okay, so we'll read these quickly. This is a verse from the Torah where he says, "Do the commandments I command you today." And the commentaries explain, God is saying today is a time to work. Only in the next world do we receive the reward. In other words, saying, number one, that not necessarily will all the rewards be in this world. And number two, don't think that the ultimate is the next world. The ultimate is this world, because this is when we can work. And as Pirkei Avot said, Alil, I'll have you read it.
Okay, also, sorry, Elia wanted me to tell you that her Wi-Fi has been out for a long time and she's trying to get back, but
okay, yeah, so okay, I'll send her afterwards the link to the video so she can watch that. Thank you.
yeah. Okay, 1 hour is precious. He used to say, more precious is 1 hour in repentance and good deeds in this world than all the life of the world to come, and more precious is 1 hour of the tranquility of the world to come than all of the life of this world.
So he explains, basically saying, what are the gifts of each place? In this world, the gift is being able to do good things. That is not available in the next world. The gift of the next world, meaning what's its talents, what's its pros, its gifts, what's its strong point? Enjoyment. So even if a person doesn't have any enjoyment in this world, all the enjoyment in this world fails in comparison to just 1 hour of enjoyment in the next world. And all the good deeds that one can do in the next world is nothing compared to just 1 hour of doing something in this world. So this world is a world to work, and that's the job we have now. Use it out to the best of your ability. I'll say this parable outside because we're a little late. I don't want to go too much over time. Basically, a guy is going to another planet, and over there's diamonds, but he gets so caught up with the local currency, which is dirt. And then he forgets that he should take diamonds with him, and he brings back a bunch of dirt. So too in our world, we get sent down from heaven, and our job is to do good things. We get so caught up with society, and we start collecting gold and silver and diamonds and cars and houses and mortgages. And then we come up to the next world and we show all of our wealth, and God says, well, where's your mitzvot? Where's your Torah? Where's your good deeds? Where's your kindness? That is all gone. And we say, oh my gosh, I totally got caught off guard. I forgot what I was supposed to be doing. So we could read that parable later. You'll have it online if you watch the video. Let's go to our key points, and with that, we'll conclude. Welcome back, Eliyah. We got the message from Layla. No worries. I'll send you the link afterwards as well. So let's start with our key points. Sheila, if you'd like to read point number 1.
To understand life after death, we have to first understand what makes us alive physically and spiritually.
Right. So we started off the class with discussing what does it truly mean to be alive? What defines us? Not like the scientists say that we're just a brain, we're just a mechanical machine, but we have a soul. We have something that is truly always alive, connected to God, something that cannot die. And the next point, Stein, if you'd like to read point number 2.
We are all made of energy. Energy is always constant, changing from one form to another, but never destroyed. So our soul never dies because it's a form, I guess it's a form of like energy, or
Right.
it's like energy.
Yeah, exactly. It's a godly energy, and energy cannot be destroyed. It cannot die. It doesn't disappear. Okay, Layla, point number 3.
We are more than a culmination of our DNA, bodily functions, and even thoughts and memories. Yeah, so like if we just saw ourselves as our bodily functions and DNA, then yeah, like those are things that aren't really living, and so then they can't really die. So there's something more to us. Like we said, God breathed life into us, so there's that aspect of us that is more than any of these physical things.
Right. And if you remember, we gave the example of a clone. If someone was able to get a clone, do you remember that? A clone can do exactly all the bodily functions and thoughts and memories, but you mentioned that you wouldn't be happy with such a clone because it's just not the same. There's something missing. It's not the same soul. Okay, point number 4, Eliyah, if you'd like to read.
The real us transcends physical constraints and is directly connected to the divine. So we're not our bodies, we're our souls, and that's what's connected to God, and that's like who we are, and that's and our souls will.
Yeah. Okay. I think you got, okay. So we did mention that, and like we clarified, we said, if you ask, well, the real me, the way I know myself today, will that continue to exist? And the answer is, it's really up to you. It's only up to you. Depending on how you live your life now, how much you invest. Are you a cloud person or are you a device person? If you write down all your notes in person and there's a fire, you will be left with 0 notes. But if you write all your notes in the cloud, assuming the cloud never gets destroyed, your notes will last on forever. So too with the body and the soul. Point number 5, Sheila, if you'd like to read.
When we die, the physical limitations of our body fall away and our unlimited soul is freed.
Right, and we gave the example then of the balloon. We said the balloon holds back the helium from expressing itself, from being the way it wants to be. And we gave other examples of like the spacesuit, where our body needs a spacesuit in this world, but as soon as it goes to the next world, it doesn't need that. It's not that we are different. The soul had one form that it needed to survive in this world, which is a body. And then in the heaven, it doesn't need that form in order to survive. Okay, Layla, point number 6.
Okay. By identifying with this lofty soul. Through Torah and mitzvot, we achieve spiritual immortality. Yeah, so it's just about what we do during like this life, or when our, not this life, but like
Yeah.
the people we are now, and by connecting to God through mitzvot and studying Torah like we're doing now, we can like better accept God's divine light when we get to Ha'olam Haba.
Very good. So it's like learning the language of the heavenly soul in order that we should be able to communicate, enjoying the music, learning about classical music before we go to the symphony so we can actually appreciate it. And as we said, now we don't think we want it because we're so connected to our bodies that our body tells us what's stress. Anything that the body doesn't want, he controls us. But if we can imagine leaving the body, it would be so relieving in the sense of being able to enjoy things that we believe we want to enjoy, but we just don't get the opportunity as much in this world. Okay, with that, we'll conclude the class. I believe it's a really important and nice class, giving us a nice perspective on the Jewish version or the Jewish view of afterlife. This is the last class. We will have next week the test that will be for Leila and Elia to take the test, and we'll start again another course. I'll send out the information shortly. There's another course that's going to start. For those who would love to join, we're happy to have you on board. Wishing you all the best. Thank you for joining.
All right, thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank
Yes.
you.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.